Okay, so this is the second part of the video. So you could apply this to il2 or DCS. So you could apply it to any type of controller input, but specifically I'm targeting console, people with console controllers, but it'll work with anything. Now, let's start off with the easiest example, which is rebinding or remapping something on a physical controller to a virtual axis. So we install vjoy, we install joystick gremlin. There's a joystick gremlin fork that might be worth checking out. I'm not using it, but I think it's more up to date. Now, we have to make sure we turn on the control scheme. Now what the scheme here is by default the triggers are one unified axis. So with nothing pressed on the triggers, the axis is at 0%. When you press the left trigger in, it'll move the axis to, let's say, minus 100%. And if you press the right trigger, it'll go to 100%. So what I've done is I've split it into two axes with here, which is it's real simple. You just go add a remap, add, and then you just remap to what you're remapping to, and the axis, and that's it. And you do it again for that one, but a different axis, and that's done. That's easy. You might benefit from it, you might not. Now this is the interesting bit. So in il2, engine control is absolute, okay? With the 190, you can either be at 100% throttle, 85% throttle, 80% throttle, or, well, for my control scheme, I have 60 and 0. But 100%, you get the shortest timer, red engine mode. At 85% throttle, it's orange timer. You get, 30 minutes or something. 80% is unlimited. And then 60 and 0. Oh, and I have 30 in there as well, just for quality. So you can see here absolute values. So what I've set up is I have two buttons on my console controller, throttle up and throttle down. And so what they do is they move it between these values, 100, 85, 80, 60, 30, and 0. I hit the button. If I'm at 0% throttle and I press up throttle, it'll jump to 30. If I press it again, it'll do 60, etc., etc., etc. So how do you set that up? And I'll just demonstrate it happening here. So you can see the throttle's at 0%. 0% in-game is minus 100 in joystick gremlin. The conversion factor is so the value equals to be minus 1. Let me just double check that. Yeah. So the in-game value is B, and you times it by 2 minus 1, that'll get the joystick gremlin value. Okay, so I'll walk you through throttle up and how I have it set up. So throttle up, the first step is 30% in game. So we can see here absolute position. That means it'll set it to that as a fixed value. If I had this as relative, every time I press the button it would change by that much. But now when I press the button, it is set to that value. Now It's setting a virtual vjoy axis, which is called slider, which is the slider is axis 7 in here. So this is just all the things on the vjoy device, and dial. These ones are all axes you can use. I'm just using slider, and so yeah. So how does this all work? Well, it's conditional. So it will only, if I press the throttle up button and we are between -1 and -0.4, if the virtual throttle is in between those two values, then pressing the button will set it to this value. Okay? So if it's between, basically, if it's between 0 in game and 30 or 29% in game, it will set it to 30%. Now, you don't have to be super accurate. Like in theory, I could just be from -1 to minus 0.9 because my throttle's never going to be at 20 because it can't get to, there's no way for it to get to 20. But later on I'll give you a little trick on why it's easier to kind of do it like this. So this is the first step. And then the second step is to get it to 60%. So that's 0.2 in vjoy. And then it's just, so this value here is 0.35. So we have to make sure so what I do is I put 0.35 in here, and then I just roll the mouse wheel, and that puts it down an extra 0.05. So that, and then this value is determined by the next one, but doesn't really matter. But, and then, so what I mean by that is here you can see I've copied 0.15, copied it into here. Now why is it 0.15? Because, why is it 0.15? Oh yeah, because 0.15 is like one tick less than this. It just has to be within it. And I just roll the mouse wheel and it changes it. So that's what I do. So you can, once you've put in your first value, and the left-hand side value has to be the lowest, otherwise it won't work. So you can see you just start off conditional -1, which is throttle at 0%. Then you just put in the value here that you want, and then you put it in there and roll up one, and then you copy and paste that value into here, and then what was that? Or was it a different value? Was it 3.5? Oh, it doesn't matter. And then you copy from that into there and make it bigger, and then that into there and make it smaller. Hang on, I'll just reload it. Discard changes. So just to double check, and I'll just go through it with you. So minus 0.35 between -1 and -0.4. So then I put 0.4 in here. Oh, where'd it go? 0.4 goes into the next one on the left hand side. Then this value's in the middle of that. No, it's not. And then this last value here is this minus a notch. And I've just gone through, continued, put in all the things I want. And so there's a trick to doing this. So when you first add, you got to check add macro, add it, and it comes up here, and you click, and you go vjoy, and there's no options. How do I proceed? Right? How do I proceed? Well, you have to click this button, add new action, and then you go back here, reselect vjoy, and then you can choose this option. Okay, and then with condition to find that, you just go into it, we click action, keyboard, you can have any kind of condition you want. We want a vjoy condition, add, select, so it's the same axis, but you can also have different axes, which I'll get on in a little bit. And that is that. Okay. And so this is a pretty simple example, but you can do more cooler things. So I've got a 109, it's set up the same, just with different percentage values, because the engine modes require different percentage values. Now P51 is an interesting example, because in the P51, if I load it up and we look at the axis, so you can see here, this is pressure control and this is RPM control. Axis 6 is RPM, axis 7 is pressure. You can set it up however you want. But you can see here, I'm only changing RPM. But then when I get down to minus 40, pressure comes off. As soon as I throttle back up, even from 0 RPM, pressure comes back on. So here I've done that with pressure absolute at 0, and that's for throttle down, and the condition for that is if RPM is between -1 and -0.2. Okay, and then that will turn off, or set the axis for pressure to 0. And then for RPM, I'm just using relative, because in the P51, you can leave pressure at 100% because RPM controls pressure. So I might change this a little bit smaller so I can be more accurate. But basically, depending on your altitude, you'll be constantly changing your RPM to ensure your pressure is just hitting the engine timer limit. And flying like this is fast. There's no speed reduction or anything, because it's not like other planes where if you set pressure to 100%, pressure will be at 100%. P51 doesn't work like that. The engine pressure is determined by altitude, so atmospheric pressure, I guess, like multiplied by some factor with the RPM. I guess because it's like supercharged or whatever. But this makes the P51, if you're new to the game and you've only been flying 109s and 190s because they're so easy to control, you can control the P51 just like a 109 or a 190. A little bit more difficult because you've got to be constantly, to manage top speed, you've got to be constantly governing RPM. But yeah, so that's another example of how you can use this and how you can use conditions based on different axes. Now, the most complicated example I've got is the P47, okay? So you can see here, so what I've done here is each engine mode, so for the sorry if the text is a bit too small, but so for the P47, my engine modes with 150 octane are 100 RPM, 100 pressure. The next mode I've got is, oops, wrong plane. So the next mode I've got is 100 pressure and, sorry, did I say RPM first? So 100 RPM, 100 pressure. The next setting is 84 RPM, 84%, 84% RPM, and 100 pressure. And that gives you maximum horizontal straight line speed. Okay. The next one I've got is again 84% RPM, but 95% pressure, which is a lower engine setting, so you get longer at that. The next one I've got is 84 RPM, 85 pressure, I just simplified it to 84. And then the next engine mode I've got is 33 for like gliding or whatever. I'm probably gonna fiddle around with it a bit more, and then 0, 0. So you'll notice, and if you've ever thought about the conditionals and whatnot, having I want it to be in this order, but it's going to be difficult in reality to do this with just conditionals. But the trick is, you instead of setting it to 84, you set it to 83.99999 and 83.9998, right? And then you do the same with this one here. This one here is instead 99.9999, right? And so you're creating these pairs. If you're familiar with Python, it's kind of like a tuple, but not at all. And then, so another trick with Gremlin is you can just copy and paste in the folder. So once you've set up like an introduction profile, you can just copy and paste it, rename it for a new one. So with the P47, I'll demonstrate it here. So we've got to turn it on here, otherwise it won't work. If we make any edits, we have to turn it on and off for those edits to apply. Okay, and then so you can see here, zero in-game will be 0, 0, then 30, 30, then 84, 84, and then this is where the magic starts. See, 68% in-game, it hasn't changed, but now we're at 90%, now we're at 100% on pressure. So this at this setting, it's maximum straight line speed, and then one more click, and we're at 100%, 100%, really thrashing the engine if we were in a climb or a low speed dogfight or whatever. So how we set this up is, like I said, we use slightly smaller numbers. So I'll go through the throttle up example. So to start this off, I just add in 10 things straight up, because we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 engine settings we want, but obviously throttle up isn't going to have, you can't throttle up to 0, 0. So there's only going to be 5 in throttle up, 5 in throttle down, and because we're doing pairs, we need 10. So I just go in and add 10, click, click, click this 10 times for throttle up, click 10 times for throttle down, and we're in the races. Now the first thing I'm doing here is RPM control. So at 100% RPM, the condition is between 0.679 and 1. Remembering that the lowest value has to be on the left-hand side. Now where the magic starts, okay? 0.68, condition, 0.677 and 0.679. So you can see there's 0.002 difference between these two values, and the middle value is the value below, this one here. So we can only it'll only set this if we are between these two values, and the only value between those two values is this value. So by only changing the third significant figure, or 0.001, which would be 0.1%, so we can kind of do a little tricky and get the positions we want. So Z rotation is for RPM, and then I get down here into pressure, And you can see I've done the same thing, 0.998, and condition that is well, this is a better example. The condition here, 0.997, 0.999. That goes in there, 0.998. So when I fill these numbers in, I start from the bottom. Well, it depends, throttle up and throttle down. You'll get into like a scheme of things where you're like, okay, this one, so throttle up has to start at 0, so you put that in. Well, actually, when I do it, so I write it down, figure out what I want over here. Then I fill in these values, fill in all these values, and then for the conditions, then you just go, so this has to be 0, then you copy that into there, and then hit up, and then you copy that into there, copy that, or no, and then you copy that into there, and roll, what have I done? Roll down. Yeah, roll down one. And that's how you can quickly fill it in without, having to think too much. And then these ones here, you just have to think a little bit more, but pretty easy to do. So, yeah, that covers everything. So when I'm flying the P-47, I've got 2 buttons, and you can see here, pressure and RPM, fully controlled. I'm fully hitting my engine modes. For something like the 109 with megawatt 50, don't at me. If your throttle is between 80 and 100%, your engine will blow up in 1 minute. With this, that's impossible because your throttle, if you're at 80% throttle, 60% in joystick gremlin, you can only go to 100%. So, a bit of a philosophical conclusion to this. il2 and flight sim in general, if you buy like a expensive throttle, you get an analog input method for the throttle. None of the throttles in il2 are in reality or in function analog throttles. Okay, all of the throttles, because of the engine timers, the Russian planes don't have engine timers, so I guess you could say they're analog. But in reality, everything's absolute. Okay, it's digital. You got to be digitally precise. Like if you're at 99% in a 109, it'll blow up. So this just makes sense. You can do this with an analog controller. This is this is an electronic detent. So you could set this up with your analog. You've got the Virpil or the VKD slider throttle. Anytime at analog axis, you can use these conditionals as it's kind of like remapping it, but it'll work. But in my case, I'm just using push buttons on a console controller. Yeah. So more complicated things I haven't got into is like for the P-47, for maximum horsepower, you want to have it on full mix and water injection turned on. So you can automate that by having it so that have a conditional setup. So if the axis is at 100% pressure, then if you could have it so that if it's at 100% pressure, so it's already at 100% pressure, right? And full mix and water isn't on, but then you hit the throttle up button again, and because your conditional is it has to be at 100%, then it kicks in water and full mix. And then for your throttle down button, if it's at 100% and you throttle down, then it turns off water and mix. You can do things like that. You could do things like you could probably tie this in with voice attack, maybe. You could have things like, say for the 109, you could have a little macro that hits up so it turns off automatic water radiator and shuts the water radiator. So that would be like, like a full maximum speed mode, right? Um, Heck, you could even fiddle around with the manual RPM governor in 109s and have kind of some automated thing. I haven't got into that. I've just got things pretty easy to fly. And so just to finish up, 190 with this control scheme, this is how Kirk Tank wanted you to fly the 190, right? 190 already has absolute flat control, right? You hit the flat button once, combat, hit it again, landing. So now you can do this with your throttle, right? Throttle at cruise, throttle at combat, throttle at full emergency. And yeah, like I said, okay, so finally, maybe I should have started with this, but the final step you need to do for this to work is, in my case, because I'm using Steam input to pass controls from the controller via Steam input into the game, okay, if I just went into the game and bound my throttle to the AB buttons or the cross circle buttons on my controller, the game would detect the raw button inputs, the real button inputs, and ignore this axis input, okay? So what I have to do is, I've got the game started up, and then I turn off Steam input. Turn off Steam input, have joystick gremlin turned on, and then hit your physical buttons, and then that's when the game will detect the axis. So, some of you who have been following along this incoherent ramble might realize, ooh, how did he do it with the P47 then? Because he's controlling, multi-track drifting. He's controlling two axes independently with a single pair of buttons. Well, you just make a joystick gremlin profile where the button controls one axis, and then you make another profile where it controls the other axis. Start up il2, turn off Steam input, load up, il2 pressure profile, press your buttons in the game and bind it to pressure, and then change your profile to RPM, which is controlling the other axis, the RPM axis, bind it in game. Then you're good to go. You never have to do any funny stuff again. You can just start the game up, have Steam input turned on. You don't have to turn that on and off. You can just leave it turned on from then on. So then if you want to start the game, just open up Steam, click il2.exe, then you can skip the launcher. Bam, ready to go. Choose the plane you want to fly, load up the profile for that plane, and bingo bango, you're good to go. There's no fiddling around with stuff once you have this all set up. Remember to save profiles and whatnot when you're doing this. You can make backups, copy paste them, whatnot. This mode thing I'm not too sure about, but that's an option. What else? Yeah, and so you think, oh, I've got to create one for every plane. Not really, because all 109s have the same engine modes basically, and the 109 engine modes are the same on the 110, on the 410. Yeah, so it's a little bit of hassle. I mean, as far as I'm aware, I'm the only person doing this, talking about it and sharing it. But I mean, if other people want to create electronic detents, um, what was the other word oh, the original name I had for all this was electronic detent. So you can share, it's difficult, you can't share the XML with someone else because it's got all this back end USB, UEID, rada stuff. But the bulk of the text where these actual things are, you can just copy and paste. So I won't include that in this video because it's probably getting way too long as it is. But you can easily just copy and paste. So the code in the XML, if you open it up, the code has all the technical stuff at the top and at the bottom. And then in the middle of the code, there'll be a bit which is basically just this in code form. So you can 100% easily share. I can share this with you, but we can just copy and paste the thing, and then you just make your own profile on your own computer with your own hardware and just have it set up, and then you just copy and paste this and it'll copy and paste all the hard bits. So maybe I should have started with this as well, but it is possible to share, reproduce this. You don't have to individually craft and muck around with this. You can absolutely share edents, electronic detents, with each other. Um, and what else did I come up with? And another thing I came up with, I haven't implemented it yet, but a little extra bonus note is I've got spare buttons on my controller. So what I was thinking of doing is having basically a pair of buttons dedicated to overshooting, where basically I hit one button, it sets the engine at full power, and I hit the other button, it sets the engine at no power. Maybe you could add in some radiator and flap bindings to it as well. So it's basically just make the plane as slow as possible, make the plane as fast as possible, and then you just hit one button or the other to go as fast or as slow as possible. That obviously reduces pilot load and whatnot. But obviously, say the 190, you only have to hit the button to go from 100% throttle to 0% throttle. You only have to hit the button 5 times. What is it? One, two, three, four, five. So it's pretty easy. I don't know if you can hear me clicking, but so full throttle, low throttle. So maybe that's slower than what some of you guys can do with your dismounted throttles, slamming it back and forth. But also remember that in-game throttle movement is not infinite speed. It's it's at the there's a real physical limitation on it. So you can't move your throttle from 0 to 100% at the speed of light. There's an in-game limitation on how fast it moves. And I think different planes have different values as well. Um, yeah, I think that kind of covers it all. I hope I explained how to do it and made it easier enough. when I'm creating these pairs, so I just start the game up, start up a quick mission, jump in the plane I want, and then I just use my keyboard to move the throttle and RPM up and down, find the engine modes I want, using a combination of cockpit notes and the mod that you can just download on the forum and Technochat. And then I come up with these, single values in case of like the 190 or these pairs of values. And so then I write it down. I write down the values I need for down throttle, and then I write down the values I need for up throttle in the in-game values. So these are the in-game values, right? 33%, 100%, 84%. And then I load up just a browser spreadsheet or, Excel or any kind of spreadsheet program. Put in the real game values, and then I just do the formula 2b, so 2 times the in-game percentage minus 1 gives me the joystick value. And then I just have a little table of these I've noted down actually. So I don't even have to bother with a spreadsheet anymore. And yeah, this might have been a bit long and convoluted, but hopefully it makes it easy to understand. And yeah, just to reiterate, you can copy and paste the XML. Not all of it, but so say I was to share this with you, what I would ask you to do is just make a new profile, save it, rename it, whatever. Then you open up that profile in your favorite notepad, say Notepad++, or Windows inbuilt notepad editor or whatever. Then you just scroll down to the bit and it's in XML format. So basically it'll have like button to throttle down, or on my XML it's got button to throttle down or something like that, and then all this code, and then it has button to throttle down and then a backslash to indicate that section of the code's finished. So you just copy from. So what I would get you to do is in your profile, just make a new profile and then set up, go to the controller you want here, which in my case, it detects it as the wireless controller. Then find the button you want to bind it to, okay? So you can just do that by pressing the physical buttons and it'll tell you which, see? I'm pressing the buttons on my controller. And then rename them to what you want them to be. Then save the profile. Then open that profile in a text editor, Notepad++, whatever. And then open up my XML, and then you'll be able to see, you won't have a whole bunch of code for these two buttons, but you'll be able to see where they have the start of the name, then the name again, the backslash, and then in between is where you paste it. It might even, if I was doing this with someone, I might even tell them to click add macro, just so it's even easier to find. But yeah, so it's not super easy to replicate, as in that I can't just share the XML with you because it's got all this hardware specific, USB, Windows specific. God, you might even have, if you like reinstalled on your computer, you would probably have to copy and paste the important bits. You probably couldn't just reuse the same XML, which is, it's not, like I said, it's not a big deal. You can just copy and paste the the bit that takes time, and the rest of it is just a matter of clicking new profile save, and maybe this to just make it easier. Where make sure you copy and paste it in the right place. Um, yeah, and you can do this for DCS, il2, whatever you want. You don't have to use this for buttons. You can have your Virtual analog, any kind of analog throttle you could set up with these conditions. Um, so basically, you could imagine if, so this one here, for example, right? Imagine if your analog controller was at 96%, and that would blow up your 109 engine because megawatt 50 would only engages at 100%, and this will give you an absolute value of 0.7. So if you're setting it up like that, don't copy this exactly because this is for buttons. But if you were using it for an analog controller, you would say that if it's between 95% and 100%, make it 100%, right? Because you know that the only time you're between 95% and 100% is when you're flying a 109 with megawatt 50 and it's going to blow up at that setting. So it's kind of like a scoop, kind of like you're condensing the analog input and reducing the, you can say like the analog input might have 68,000 different positions it can be in, but in il2 you don't need that degree of accuracy on the axis. You just want it to be, if my throttle's somewhere near the top, you could change this. So if I were if I was using a controller, I would change this to zero point 0.9, which I think is an in-game of 80%. So I'd change it to 0.91. So basically, if my throttle is over 80%, then it's going to set it to 100%. That would be a little trick for the 109, little bonus amendment. Little trick there to save your little 109 engine. Little weirdos. Okay, catch you later.